So it is my very great pleasure to welcome all of you here. This is a first of its kind forum, and we have the wonderful ALBA Network to thank for this. Students who joined, students and postdocs, please do find out about the ALBA Network. You will see links and information in the chat box. It's in brief, it's a group of people who like-minded people who want to promote diversity and equity and inclusion. In the neurosciences in particular, most of us are neuroscientists, but broadly these principles apply to all of sciences and indeed all professions. So if you are not particularly a neuroscientist, that's all right. Everything in this session will actually be useful for you and will help you no matter what field you want to do later on. So I'm Shubha Tole. I'm a scientist at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai, where my lab has been for 25 years now. And it is my great pleasure to welcome three wonderful colleagues who have themselves done a fair bit of engagement with students, with various communities. So just to introduce them, Patricia Gaspar. Let's spotlight. Let me see if I can.
Hello everyone.
Sorry, I don't have spotlight control scenes, but all right. And Erin Schumann.
Hello.
And Denija Baudon.
Hello, everyone.
So without further ado, we will just begin. So because we don't want to waste a minute of your time, I will request each speaker to begin with sort of saying where they work, and we have 3 European countries represented that you already know. And we'll just start. So let me invite Patricia, please.
Can you hear me? Good. Okay. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining. It's really a great initiative. I had the pleasure to go to India to the Tata Institute a few years ago, and I was really pleased to see the quality of students there, and surprised that not so many come to Europe. But so I'm happy to help you and guide you through this process. So I'm Patricia Gaspar. I'm at the Paris Brain Institute. I'm actually retired, so I'm an emeritus, and I still belong to the INSERM organization. So I'm also part of the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies as a member of the Committee for Higher Education and Training. So I just wanted to emphasize the utility of this platform, the FENS website, where you see the link here on the slide. That would be a very useful resource, I think, for any of you who is engaging to go to Europe for training. In this platform, you can find a number of things that will help you to. Oh, I'm sorry. How can I go? I'm not sure. Oh, yeah. So one of them is, for instance, to help you to go to attend European meetings, where it's a nice place to meet PIs and see what they're doing. And just want to highlight here the FENS Forum, which will be in Vienna in June. The deadline for registration is soon, actually in February 9. And yeah, there are travel grants possible for this. So I engage you to have a look at this and see whether you want to attend. Other initiatives of the FENS are the Brain Conference, one which is going to be again this summer, Circuits for Movement in Copenhagen. These are smaller meetings, about 100 people, but they're on a specific topic. One of them will be actually led by Erin Schumann here on neural protein synthesis mechanism in October. There are also winter and summer schools. Again, one this summer, one which is organized with the Swiss Society in Lausanne. This is again even smaller groups, about 30 students or postdocs who can attend this, and on a very specific topic. And this one, the one who's coming, is on the perspectives of neurotechnologies and AI and affected states. And I just want to highlight the fact that FENS is offering a few, and with IBRO, a few stipends for foreign students who would want to attend these conferences. I think it's a good way to get into the European scene. The other aspect that we're promoting in FENS is to have a map actually of the institutes and the research panorama in Europe. This is it's on one page of the website you can find, and it's called Neuro. It's still in construction, so if you go there for the moment, you only can see all the graduate programs which are listed here, and then you can see that they cover up a lot of all the European countries you may be interested in. And then there will be institutes and PIs, so that when you can click on one of these sites, you can go to the institute and have the link to the institute and see what the institute is doing, who are the PIs, and eventually job opportunities there. There's something a bit similar, but to a lesser degree maybe, but in these national societies and the French. So if I go back to France, where I belong, is the French Neuroscience Society. This is again the address of the website, has a bit of these same opportunities, where you can have actually, if you go on this page and you go neuroscience in France and neuroscience research in France, you can have some aspects of where the research institutes are more specifically in France. And this gives you an idea that it's not only Paris, but there are many centers in Paris. I have them listed here, but there are also many very excellent research institutes all over France. I listed only a few, like in Strasbourg, Lyon, Bordeaux, Montpellier, Marseille. But in this page in the website, you can find a link to these institutes and have a look. I just listed to see the variety of institutes that are available in the Paris region. You can see all these. I mean, they're more specialized on one or another domain of neuroscience. What is interesting in Paris is that they're all in a very small perimeter, so that you can almost walking distance from one institute to another. So that's an interesting aspect of the research going on here in neuroscience. So on these websites, you can identify funding resources sometimes, so this can be helpful. So on the FENS website, there's the FENS job market tool, which displays hundreds of neuroscience jobs across the world, but also mainly in Europe, for both students, postdocs, and academics. And there is a similar tool here in job offers of the French Society. And I just clicked yesterday on job offers available, so I can see that there are 3 postdoctoral positions open, 2 in Paris, 1 in Marseille, where you can just have a look and see what's in there. So to identify funding, there are these job markets, which are very useful. But otherwise, if you identify a PI where you want to work, I think, and you want to work out on funding, there are several resources, but this is best to discuss with your supervisor and to see how to apply, what is requested, and you will need the help of your mentor or PI. And what you must know is that to obtain this funding, most of the time, at a minimum, it would be 6 months before you can arrive to the country that you have to do this application. So which gives you a timeline of what is needed here. There are also some positions directly advertised on, which are not necessarily on these websites, but that can be advertised on the institutes and on the PI pages. And I just clicked also yesterday to see what's open here in the institute where I am at ICM. And I can see there's a position here for a new team who just came in and got a big grant to establish his lab. And he's looking for a postdoc. So, so this is something also that could be quite interesting. It takes more time, of course, and according to your interests. Shuba asked us, is the language a problem? France, yeah, it's clear that French has a bad reputation for this, is that, tourists always complain that when it's difficult to engage a conversation in another language than French, but I think this has changed over the years. And in the universities and in the labs, English will be the working language, including for seminars and team meetings, etc. So I think this has really changed over the last, I would say, 10 years, and has become, I think, in most research centers in France, a practice. You will be expected to write your applications with the help of the PI. And there was a question here for the papers. Also, this would be something that you would have to do with the supervision, of course, of your PI. Concerning the language, I was thinking that some of our foreign people working in the labs have a problem with the technical staff, like animal facility or other resources where, may not be so fluent in French. And sometimes there are some complications with the mutual understanding. But I think this can be resolved at the team level with your PI. Help with everyday life. Also, there's the conundrum of coming to a foreign country, visas, paperwork, carte de séjour, etc. In France, it's not very friendly, I'm afraid. It's a bit complicated. I know in our research center, but it's a big one, we have some administrative staff who can help, foreign researchers with all this conundrum. Else, I think most of the time it will be the PI who can help you and guide you, or colleagues guiding you through this. Another conundrum is housing, more complicated in Paris, of course, region than in the other towns. There's some university housing available, but these are rather scant possibilities. So this is really to be booked in advance and requires quite some organization. Food, I know in India has a lot of vegetarian. French is not famous for vegetarian, but this is starting also, this is changing slowly. So this will be the end. And this is just, I'll say welcome to France. And don't hesitate to send me an email if you need more information. And this is a map of Paris, nice places to visit in addition to the Brain Institute. Well, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Patricia. That was a lot of useful info in a short time. If you could just post your PowerPoint on the chat, then in addition to the recording, people have the links.
Okay, I'll do so.
And let's move to Germany, the land of mostly vegetarian food. No. Erin, please, the show is yours. We can't hear you, you're muted.
Can you see my screen? Yes, great. Okay, I am Erin Schumann. I'm American by birth. I did my graduate and postdoc training in the US and got my first faculty position in the US. But in 2009, I moved to Germany, where I, together with my husband, Gilles Laurent, built a new Max Planck Institute that I'll tell you more about the Max Planck Society and neuroscience opportunities during this talk. So what I'd like to describe today is the opportunities for postdocs within the Max Planck Society, because there are many Max Planck Institutes. Talk briefly about postdoc programs at the European Molecular Biology Labs, which are a set of labs that are scattered throughout Europe, but arguably the largest one is in Germany, in Heidelberg. Touch a little bit on other major postdoc opportunities in Germany, and then at the end, a little bit about funding. So to give you some background on the Max Planck Society, this is an international flagship for German science. It's one of many research organizations in Germany. It was founded in 1948 after the war as the successor to an organization that was called the Kaiser Wilhelm Society. It's a nonprofit organization, and we conduct basic research in the natural sciences, life sciences, and in the humanities. There are around 85 Max Planck Institutes. We have an annual budget of 1.97 billion. And this money comes from the federal government, so taxpayer money, as well as the states that are present in Germany. And then we also have a lot of third-party money. Altogether, we have around 24,000 people working in the Max Planck Society and 3,000 postdocs. Of the 85 institutes, 6 of the institutes are neuroscience institutes. You can easily find those on the Max Planck website. The Max Planck Society is a prestigious society. We have had the fortune of having 31 Nobel laureates, and we publish lots of papers every year. We have a special program in the Max Planck Society for postdocs. So, and this is actually even getting better now. So there's a new next generation of postdoc program that's being worked on right now within the administration. But as a postdoc, you'll, of course, familiarize yourself with aspects of independent scientific work. You'll work largely independently under the supervision of a director or a research group leader. So within Max Planck Institutes, there are larger labs that are run by so-called directors, a bit like a large full professor lab at a university. And then there are smaller labs that are run by research group leaders that's very similar to like an assistant professor in the US system. One of the really great things about Max Planck Labs is the resources that we have. So you'll have access to state-of-the-art scientific infrastructure and equipment. You'll be able to further your education and raise your profile through projects, publications, and participating in conferences. You'll be empowered to take on leadership responsibilities, and you'll gain managerial skills and teaching skills. So within the Max Planck Society, we have several, besides just the lab work, there are several support networks for postdocs. So, gosh, I don't know why that's happening. So we have, for example, onboarding at all of the institutes and also within the general administration. There's an active equal opportunity and diversity, equity, inclusion group. There's a postdoctoral network. So all of the postdocs across all of the 85 institutes can join this network and get access to the resources. We have lots of events and workshops for postdocs. So we have career programs. We have certain programs that are just for female postdocs. So this is on networking and making the transition to beyond postdoc to either working in industry or working, having your own independent lab or other options. There is something called the Planck Academy, which is a series of resources for people who have moved to Germany. And then there's a special office on how to combine career and family. And interestingly, also, we have within the Max Planck Society something called the Max Planck India Mobility Grant, which is a special grant that you get, you can get as a postdoc in India to come to Germany for a month and spend a month over the course of 3 years in a host lab. And that is funded by the Max Planck Society. And they give money to support you, as well as money for the host lab to support you when you're there. So how do you become a postdoc in the Max Planck Society? Scientific excellence is the primary quality that you would need. You find your PI in your institute by looking on the web and hopefully already being familiar with some of the research that's being done. Sometimes the postdoctoral positions are advertised in journals and magazines. I would say that many Max Planck directors and group leaders also get most of their postdocs from just people writing to them. If you're an experienced postdoc, you of course then could come into the Max Planck Society as a research group leader, which is kind of the next step, as I said, the equivalent of like an assistant professorship. And at that level, we have Max Planck research groups, but we also have a special program for female postdocs that's called the Lisa Meitner Excellence Program. And these research group programs are of a nature where you have a defined contract, usually 6 years, that can be extended once for an additional 3 years. And then after that, the expectation is that you move on. And in our experience, at least in our institute, all of our group leaders have gone on to get their own independent kind of dream job faculty position. So typically, because of the resources and the environment, the research group leaders in the Max Planck Society do really well. Now at EMBL, this is the European Molecular Biology Organization. This is also an international nonprofit organization that has 28 member states. They have the same breadth of research. There are 6 sites, one in Barcelona, Spain, Grenoble, France, Hamburg, Germany, Heidelberg, the headquarters, and then there's also one in the UK based on bioinformatics, and one in Rome. There are a large number of research groups, several with a neuro focus. So I guess Rome is probably the largest neuro focus. It's really an EMBL site that is focused on neuroscience. There's around 250 postdocs within these organizations. And EMBL has a series of specialized postdoc fellowships that are available, and I have the links here. So for example, there's the Heidelberg site of EMBL has recently undergone a kind of scientific renaissance in what they're approaching. And so they have a program, Molecules to Ecosystems. And all of these fellowships come with a 3-year contract, and they have a lot of support. I note that the deadline for this year is coming up, and you have a host and a partner that you plan your project with, and then you submit your proposal. Then some of the other sites also have specialized EMBL postdocs, and I put the links in here. And then in addition to the Max Planck Society within Germany, there are several research organizations that often have postdoc monies associated. For example, the Helmholtz Association, they have individual Helmholtz centers have postdoc positions, and like the Max Planck Society, they have career development programs. There's the Fraunhofer institutes, which also have some neuroscience. They have their own postdoc opportunities. And then there are the Leibniz Research Institutes, which also, for example, have some focus in neuroscience, and they also have funding opportunities. So these are research organizations where you can find neuroscience researchers and potential host labs for your postdocs, but where you could take advantage of funding from these societies. And then in addition to these societies, of course, another source of postdocs is to look within the neuroscience programs at German universities, for example, the Technical University in Munich. And there are many different postdoctoral fellowships. There's the Humboldt Foundation Fellowship. There's the Peter and Tradel Engelhorn Foundation Fellowship. And then there's also the DAAD fellowships. And then there's also, and this is especially a good choice if you're working at a university, there's the German research organization called the DFG, also has postdoctoral fellowships that you can apply for. Within the DFG itself, you have different kinds of granting structures. Many of the ones that I've listed here are actually more for the transition from postdoc to group leader, for example, the Emmy Noether program and the Heisenberg program. Specifically for postdocs, I think Patricia also mentioned this, that there's the Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowships, where the application is rather involved, but those are great fellowships to get, and they can be taken and used anywhere in Europe. Similarly, the EMBO postdoctoral fellowships give you funding for 2 years. Those also can be used anywhere in Europe and also used by Europeans outside of Europe. And then there's the Human Frontiers postdoctoral fellowships. And then also FEBS also has short-term fellowships for postdocs. And with that, I finish, and I'm happy to answer questions in the general question period.
Okay, super. Actually, I learned things. There were many things that I didn't know about already. So very cool. I hope everyone's keeping their eyes and ears peeled. And let's now invite Denis Javadon from Switzerland. Hello, Denis. There.
Yes, sorry, the computer just crashed at the perfect time.
The floor is yours. We can hear you.
Thank you. All right, is it all good? Is it full screen? Yep, okay. Yes, so hello everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to share some of the information I'm going to tell you about with regard to the possibility of doing a postdoc in Switzerland. Sorry. My presentation is going to be a little bit less formal than the ones that you've just seen, for the main reason that Switzerland is a special country in Europe, in the sense that although it's geographically located at the heart of Switzerland, it doesn't belong to Europe as a political entity per se. So we have France as a neighbor, Germany as a neighbor, Italy, tiny neighbors like Liechtenstein, which you might have never heard of before, and of course Australia too. But we don't belong to this political entity, and in fact we don't belong in terms of funding to the types of fundings. This being said, I think it still remains an interesting option for people to come, and not only
I'm having trouble with the sound. Is it just me or?
No, yeah, the sound is not good.
Okay, hold on.
Sorry. Trying to move again. We'll do something. Might be better here. Is this working? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was saying I still think it's worth considering Switzerland as a possible site for you to do your postdoc, because it's a very diverse country. There's although it's a small country, there's six top-notch, at least 6 top-notch places for you to study, and to study neuroscience in particular. I'm going to drive you a little bit through this. So Switzerland, yes, small country, very well known for its landscapes and for its chocolate. Actually, I realized that we are with India, we're at both at the extremes of chocolate affinity, with Swiss people eating almost 12 kilograms of chocolate per year per person, and India is almost the last one there, just before China, with 1 kilo per person per year. Which means that although we, have about a third of the population of Mumbai, as a country, we eat more chocolate than people eat in Mumbai. Anyway, so it's a funny. It's funny. I mean, it's an interesting.
We can fix that. We can work on that.
We can work on that. It's a very diverse country in terms of geography. Of course, there's a lot of relatively rural areas, but also some big city centers, and Switzerland is well known across the world for its technology know-how. There's a lot of medium to small size enterprise that are highly specialized in different topics, in particular with regard to technology, but including biotechnologies. And in that sense, it's a highly competitive country for all things pertaining to KTT and education in general. The country itself, is is a multilingual country. There's a French-speaking part, German-speaking part. About 2/3 of the country is German-speaking, and a small part here that where people speak Italian. English is quite widespread. We learn it at school, although it's not on a daily basis that we use it. In each of these university centers, English is the main exchange language. I'll quickly drive you through some of these universities, the main ones. Although we're a multilingual country, I wasn't able to find this particular slide in English, but I guess it's relatively straightforward. Here, the circles represent the size of the given universities, the number of students. And the parts of the pie chart here represent which fraction is Swiss and which fraction is not Swiss, or Swiss raised or non-Swiss raised. So the foreigners, in terms of, we're talking here about students, not postdocs, are here in light blue. So a relatively high proportion of foreign students, which is consistent with the country being relatively small. So university centers where you can find a substantial community of researchers doing neuroscience are Geneva. This is where I reside. Yeah, I realized actually maybe I'll take sorry about that. Take a little break since I was fighting with my computer. I didn't even introduce myself at the beginning of the presentation. So I'm a professor here at the University of Geneva. I'm trained both as a neurologist and a basic neuroscientist. I did my training in part in the US, in Boston, and then some clinical training at the University of Lausanne, basic training at the University of Zurich. And now I've had my own lab here in Geneva for the past 15 years or so. So University of Geneva has a high, a large community of neuroscientists. University of Lausanne and the associated EPFL. So there's, in addition to the universities, we have the so-called technological schools, the EPFL and the ETH in Zurich, which are really top-notch institutions to go and study with a larger community of, again, state-of-the-art, not only equipment, but of course, collaborators. University of Fribourg, University of Bern, University of Basel, University of Zurich. So these two universities in Zurich and two universities in Lausanne. So plenty of choice, a lively community. The advantage of being within a relatively small country is that information flows rapidly and collaborations are easy to establish. And the advantage, of course, of being at the heart of Europe is that it's relatively easy from Geneva to go, say, to Paris. When I go and visit Patricia, it's a 4 hours train max. It's easy to go to Basel. That would be 2 hours. Then from Basel, we could go and see Erin within 3 or 4 hours of train. So it's really a central place in Europe. In terms of funding, there is one main institution that gives most of essentially all of the public funding for Swiss science, which is called the Swiss National Science Foundation. For the purpose of this particular talk, it's not directly relevant. If you come to Switzerland, you will, of course, hear about this institution. It's quite a generous institution in terms of funding. About 30 to 40% of all research projects are funded, and also generous in the sense that if you come and work to Switzerland for I think over 3 years, you can then benefit for funding to go and do, say, a second postdoc abroad. So you enter the system even as a postdoc, and you will be in principle supported for your research abroad, at least for a couple of years. Switzerland is an expensive country, and so there might be concerns of the type that the ones Patricia raised at the beginning of her talks with regard to lodging, with regard to food, with regard to quality of life as a whole. I think all in all, our students and postdoc are quite happy with their quality of life. This is a graph that I found online where it's really this line that's the important one. It's the ratio between the salary and the salary here and the cost of living, and so the higher the better in principle. And so Switzerland is relatively well located in this particular ratio. So the numbers are relatively high, but again, the price of living is quite high. In terms of general rules and tips, so Switzerland is a confederation, so meaning it's several states, if you will, several cantons that have been put together under a common umbrella. They each have their set of rules. They each have their constitution, if you will. They have different rules for school, for healthcare, etc., such that it's difficult to make a common overlying principle on what you should do to apply in Switzerland. The general rules and tips that I'm putting here are my own, because it's going to be really depending on the institution and the person. So in Switzerland, you're not typically expected to find your own funding, meaning I would encourage you to apply first and then see whether the PI has a funding that could, is interested in UMed, assuming he or she is, discuss the ways of funding your stay. Typically, the first funding is the PI. So I would really encourage you to go for people first. So try to think about things that you're interested in and then find the people that do it. I know that some people may have some geographical constraints or partners that they need to move with. When I did my postdoc in the US, one criteria was to be not too far from Europe, and so the one criteria was that it was going to be on the East Coast, and so we focused on the north of the East Coast, and then I looked for different PIs that were working on the topics that I was interested in to then organize a visit. So really, I would encourage you to do a PI guided research. As Erin was mentioning, of course, there's all these websites, and in the FENS website, you will have also advertisements for physicians in Switzerland. But I think you shouldn't feel intimidated by the fact that there is no advertisement in a particular lab. Just go for what you think is interesting. PhDs typically last 4 or 5 years, and the postdocs 3 to 4 years. It's quite flexible. We don't have strict rules in Switzerland for that. I would apply about a year to a year and a half ahead of time. 2 years is a bit too much. 1 year is a little bit tight. And one thing that strikes me, and I feel the situation is getting a little bit worse, I don't know if that's the word, is that most of the applications that I receive are from people that obviously have never heard of my lab before, so they don't refer to specificities of things that we do, and that have never even looked at the abstract of a paper from the lab. So I would really encourage you to start with the topic and the people, start with what you're interested in, and then meet people. And if the person that you meet fits what you're looking for in a mentor, then go further. But for sure, read the literature of the lab and refer to the lab. I mean, you're half of the way there if you can somehow have if the person that reads your email gets the feeling that what you're talking about. And yes, again, this is something I said above. Apply spontaneously. You will have ads on the FENS site. I personally advertise on Twitter, but I know many other colleagues do. So to finish, a selection of sites of interest. This is biased because this is our institution, University of Geneva. So there's this system, University of Lausanne, University of Neuchâtel, Bern, Bâle, Fribourg, Zurich. So it's quite easy to type in the website. This is the website for our master program, but you will have access to the labs that are out there. I think one of the limiting factors when you're applying for abroad is to know actually which labs exist and what do they do. So you could have that with regard to Geneva. This one would be for Geneva and Lausanne. And these are more broader sites that will tell you about the diversity of types of institutions that you can find in Switzerland. And of course, you can reach out to me if you have specific questions otherwise. Voilà, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Denis. That was really informative. And thanks to Patricia and Erin as well. So we should now open the floor for questions. And one useful way to do this would be for us to be able to see your questions in the chat box. And we're going to group them and address them as common themes. So before we start that, I have some information to offer. I posted something in the chat box, several links that have been collected. What I'm going to do is just take 2 minutes and share screen to show you where these resources came from. This is my institution, the Tata Institute of Graduate Studies, tifr.res.in/academics. I'll put this in the chat. And there is a guide here to navigating graduate school. So those of you who are in graduate school, wherever you are, even outside TIFR, you might find this useful. And here, planning the next stage is where these resources are. We're continuing to build and enrich this, so this might be helpful. Now, I'm going to ask our 3 speakers to address some of the questions, and maybe one big one that we will just get out of the way is something Denis alluded to, relating to the timing of the application. It is my experience, somehow in our culture, we don't believe in starting something new before we have properly finished the first task. It's actually very good training. But in applying for postdoc, this kind of doesn't work. And I continually get surprised how people write to me only after they have submitted their thesis, finished their viva, and then they want a postdoc, preferably next month. So we received several questions along this vein. What is the correct time to apply? When is the best time during the year? I think Patricia referred to summer, so you could specify what summer means for you, because it means monsoon for us. And are we eligible for a postdoc position before the PhD viva? This is kind of important for us because in India, it can take 6 months to a year after the thesis submission before the viva actually is scheduled, depending on which university and what bureaucracy students are subject to. And somebody again says, I've recently given my pre-PhD, so a pre-thesis seminar internally, writing thesis. I want to know when should I start searching for postdoc. So may I request all the speakers to just address this timing related thing? Maybe Patricia first.
Okay, yeah, it's very important, and clearly you should do this. You should try to think about it when you're in advance, at least 1 year in advance. And as I think Denis made it nice, I mean, 1.5 years would be perfect. Because by the time, the most important, as he mentioned, was identifying the lab and the topic where you want to be at. I mean, that's the fundamental thing. And then getting in contact and getting the funding will take almost, either the lab has money and can get you in very quickly, or doesn't have money, and then you have to apply for funds, and then that will take at least 6 months or 1 year according to the grant system. The reason I mentioned summer is because a lot of the for Swiss, it's a Swiss foundation. In France, it's the ANR, the National Program for Getting Funding, and the results come in July, August, and then so that people know that they have positions, they know that they have money, so that will allow us some starting, maybe not the full 2 or 3 year postdoc that is needed for a postdoc, but at least 1 year or 1.5 years. So this is the reason I mentioned summer, because that's
summer is July, August, right? Just
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, this is not obvious to Okay, wonderful. All right, Erin.
I think there's 2 components to this. One is the lab itself, and second is funding. So I would agree with Denis and Patricia that like 1 year is 1 year minimum is a very good window to apply. And I think it's important. I mean, you raised kind of a cultural difference, Shubha, but to me, when I get someone who writes and says, I want to start in a month, it
may I request everybody else to mute? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I think it doesn't reflect very well on the individual if they write with the expectation that there might be a position in a month. So I would definitely give yourself at least a year and maybe even 18 months. It shows that you're planning and that you're thinking intensely about the future. Now for funding, it's somewhat more nuanced because depending on the funding organization, there are different limits on the time that you can be in the postdoc lab and still apply for funding. For example, EMBO, I think the EMBO funding is such that you cannot have been in your host postdoc lab for more than 9 months, could be a year, I don't remember exactly. So that means that if you secure a postdoc and your host lab says, I have money to support you while you apply for fellowships, you really need to think about when those fellowship deadlines are and what those specific fellowship requirements are, because it may be that you should delay your time, because if you come too soon, you won't be eligible to actually apply for these fellowships. So you have to do research. Most places, like in our institute, we have a grant management office that can give you every single fellowship and, you know, have a spreadsheet of all of the requirements and everything.
But sorry, Erin, just to interrupt you there. Somebody asked that many of the funding opportunities you described, you have to first identify the PI, right?
Of course, yeah. Yeah. I mean, these are, you know, in neuroscience and in science, these are very tailored positions, right? So we're all hoping that you're choosing labs based on an intense passion for a topic, right? Or that you followed someone's work for a while and you're really interested in the work they're doing, not that you want to apply for some kind of generic training program. I mean, we're really talking about the specialization of your mind and your passion and the way you go about conducting yourself as a researcher. And as you make the transition to postdoc, it should really be about what really drives you, what's super fascinating to you, whose work, whose papers have you been reading that you've been admiring and have been, you know, making you think in the middle of the night about problems. This is the time to make that really kind of passionate decision about what you want to do next. It's not a general training.
But also the fellowships, the proposals are very detailed, and you typically work on them with your mentor, with your new PI.
And there, I mean, there's kind of the review panels of the fellowships want to see several things. They want to see that you've had an idea or that you developed an idea together with your host. They like to see that you've thought deeply about the problem, which is a little bit funny because you may not have already been in the lab. And they like to see that there's engagement in both sides, right? Both with between your mentor and with you. And that not only will you learn something from your mentor, but some of the places like Marie Curie really is also looking for what you bring to the host lab. So they like to see this reciprocity of, you know, you bring something that the host lab doesn't necessarily have. And of course, you gain a lot by your experience as a postdoc.
Okay, so just to take off on this point, and I'll open this to all the three speakers. I know students will apply to, you know, people, and they will sometimes get a response saying, okay, well, you know, apply to this fellowship, and then if you get funding, you can join. This is, to me, a red flag if the person doesn't want to engage with you. So could somebody comment on this briefly?
I mean, I would also say that's a red flag. I would never do that. Like, I mean, of course, different labs have different access to resources, but if I commit to wanting someone in the lab, then I commit to having some money, hopefully for them, at least for the first year, and that we would work on something together. I mean, to tell someone, just go write a fellowship, I would definitely say that's a red flag, and that might
be basically a no. So they need to hear it as a no.
No, either a no, or is that really the environment you want to, you know, go to, even if you get the fellowship? Is that really the kind of lab that you want to work in? Is that the kind of relationship you want? I would say, yeah.
Absolutely. So Jenny, if you could You already talked about the timing. There's one more question in that space. So since you said, ideally a year and a half ahead of time, many students don't yet have a first author publication in hand. So somebody has actually asked a very pertinent question. How would it work? How would somebody even consider, let me extend the question, putting myself in the student's shoes. If I don't even have a publication, how do you know what I've done? How are you going to be able to assess me at all? So how does this work?
Well, I mean, we don't evaluate people solely, and I would even say primarily, we do not do it based on the publication. Of course, if you have a nice paper, this is going to make it easier for you to have email replies or even video interviews. But I think what catches my attention in an email is, yes, things Erin was alluding to, something that is thoughtfully written, something that is directed to me or to the science that I'm doing in the lab, or to the science that I would like to do in the lab. And so that's the first, way to start a relationship. I mean, I think it's okay to establish a relationship. I've had instances where, somebody would contact me too early. I couldn't really evaluate his or her fitness, to use a somewhat of a selection related term. And decide to talk again in 6 months, and let's see. And sometimes the person spontaneously doesn't contact me, which is fine. And sometimes the person contacts me again, and we see where he or she stands. So I think you shouldn't be afraid to establish a relationship. So it doesn't mean you should spam. Anyway, it would be useless to spam, because we can spot it right away. You can tell whether if somebody writes a letter to you, our brains are designed to detect whether we elicit interest or not. And so this won't work. Again, I'm repeating it quite a bit, because I do feel there's a lot of opportunity missed by not taking enough time to write a convincing letter of motivation. One thing I'd like to add is also my personal sense, and I think, and I hope most of the PIs are like me, of responsibility with regard to when we are hiring somebody from a faraway country. I mean, I'm particularly sensitive to the fact that you often have to leave your families, that perhaps it's the first time you're going out of the country. And so I would entice you not to minimize these particular aspects, and make sure that you're going to be welcome to the place you want. I think it might be sometimes, of course, it's exhilarating, it's exciting, the perspective to go abroad, but in practice, there's going to be a number of challenges there, and you want to feel welcome and feel in a community that will be there to support you. So again, put these two aspects, the science and the people, first, and the rest will follow.
So then this is hard work, right? It's a postdoc application is an extremely serious affair. So when you said missed opportunity, what I heard was that people just sort of write a short kind of mail saying I'm interested, without actually making the case. And so there are lots and lots of blogs, some of which I shared. Patricia, yes, please. Yes. You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, just I wanted to add something with this regard to establishing a link with your host, lab, was the opportunity to go to a meeting during your PhD thesis, and I think that's one of the ways that you can really feel, for topics that you're interested in, and then see the people who are doing the work and going and discussing with them in vivo. And I often had, some of the postdocs I had were people who came to me during a meeting and started discussing. And even though I didn't, I was not prepared to get someone, but then I get a conversation with someone who seems really genuinely interested, and that really helps establishing a link. So I really encourage people to do this during the last stage of their PhD.
So, I mean, the message I'm getting is it's a one-to-one interaction, and it needs to be detailed. You need to work for it. You need to know your interests. It's no longer a generic situation. And in fact, this connects, we can broaden this now. Somebody asked during registration, what is the best possible way to network? Platforms such as LinkedIn or direct mails. And somebody else wanted to know how to search for an interdisciplinary postdoctorate. A lot of this may be coming from the fact that it's difficult for Indian students to get funding to travel abroad. A ticket to visit Europe would take more than 2 months of their stipends. So, and internal funding is limited from the government or from their institutions. And we're not even talking about hotels and so on. So, maybe if any of you can, so if they do make it to a meeting, how could they maximize their benefits? It might be the one meeting they might attend in their entire career. And if they can't make it to a meeting, what else could they do? Who would like to handle this potato?
So for the meeting, I think if there are PIs at the meeting that you really want to talk to, I would invite them to come to your poster. And not only would I invite them, I would bug them. So this happens to me sometimes that people say, oh, I would really love for you to come to the poster. And then I say, yes, tell me. But then I get very busy and people are talking to me and I don't manage to get to that person's poster. But if they are like standing there or they come up and they are like, wave to me, what I'm trying to say is be persistent. Also with the applications, so the emails that people send, as Denis and Patricia were saying, like it has to be meaningful. If you're asking to switch fields, please motivate why you're switching fields. Sometimes I get applications from someone who says, I did cognitive neuroscience. I would like to apply for your lab for a postdoc. Well, I'm a cellular and molecular neuroscientist. That doesn't make sense to me. Tell me why. Tell me what you've done that tells you that you love cellular and molecular neuroscience, and that's your next step. And even mentioning one paper for me isn't enough, because I sometimes think, oh, they just looked up my latest paper last year and they're just citing the abstract. I want to see that they've followed the track, you know, the intellectual thread of the lab for many years, and that they sort of understand what the big questions are that we ask. So it's, you know, I think we're making it sound like it's really demanding, but also imagine that we get lots of emails every day. And so we're very quick, as Denise says, at filtering the meaningful ones. And so if you really want to increase your chances, spend some time on it.
So you've already answered one of the other questions. Does your postdoc have to be in line with what you did for your PhD? And the message I got is no, if you motivate it properly, if you connect what you did. So what about people who can't make it to a conference? I guess they have to work harder at doing it, getting the engagement of their prospective PI.
I mean, I don't know how Denis and Patricia feel, but I'm sitting here already like kind of feeling guilty thinking about emails that I haven't answered in my probably way down in my inbox. So I would say that, like, if there is, let's say there's 1 or 2 labs that you know, they're your dream lab, be persistent. So not only write that first email, but let's say we imagine that you're writing that email to not just to us, but to other labs too. So you have to really show, no, I'm really interested. So if you don't hear back, you know, write again the next week and the next week. And then, you know, maybe you're going to get an answer. And maybe you also have conveyed how serious you are in your persistence. So don't just send out 20 emails and then, you know, not get any reply, but, you know, think about the labs you're super interested in and really go for it. Show your dedication by being persistent in your communication.
But sorry, may I spare?
Erin, you've just tripled the amount of emails in your mailbox.
May I spare the blood pressure of all the scientists by saying, please don't remind people every day.
Yeah, no. Like,
and choose your, you know, don't spam 20 scientists.
No, I'm trying to say do it meaningfully, because we're all super sensitive to being spammed, right? So I'd much rather get, you know, 1/10 of the requests that I get that are really meaningful, that I can spend time thinking about, than the number that I get and that I haven't responded to actually. So
if I can just take a little step back from specific questions, the original purpose of this fireside chat was to identify what it is that the target audience wants to learn about. And I think we've identified it. It is how to do this. I mean, I think a workshop in this, ALBA folks, I think a workshop in how to actually apply for a postdoc, given the Indian context and the cultural mindsets and the biases. So I can see on the chat, there are worries about, does age matter? Can a candidate who's already done 5 to 8 years of postdoc apply? So there is, so sort of this whole how to could be something we can take up in a future event. Because I think there's a lot of need in this space. That was one of the goals. But let's if somebody could answer, how would PIs perceive a career break post PhD? So this is again connected with age. Does age matter? In India, it does. So again, there's a cultural bias. In India, it does matter. In India, most institutions won't consider for faculty job anybody over 35. So then can a candidate with 5 years of postdoc already apply? And what about a career break? How would anybody like to address these? And somebody asked, how significant is the recommendation of the advisor?
I mean, maybe I can address this one. The career break or any special circumstances, I would put them on at the same level than Erin put the career change, the topic change. In principle, everything is acceptable as long as it's understandable and that we can put it in context. So I wouldn't see it as a liability as long as you explain why there is this break in your CV, why you change fields, why
you did a 5-year postdoc and are now doing
why
another.
You did a 5-year postdocs, et cetera, et cetera. Any circumstance that you feel is atypical, you can turn into an asset if you explain it properly. All of this, again, I think the framework we're working on here is one in which you're really motivated to go to a given lab, right? We're not talking about tricks to reverse engineer the system and find spots in places that you're not in principle interested in. So yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about these particular circumstances. I did a 5-year PhD and my paper is just about to come out. It took a while because of this and that. That's fine. And you can continue the conversation, right? You want to start a conversation, you don't know where it's going to lead to, but if you get to the Zoom meeting, that's already an important step, and etc. So take it stepwise, and indeed, don't take necessarily no for an answer, and also don't take the no's or the silences as directed towards you. It's just a generic lack of answer because we're busy elsewhere. So it's not like we don't like you or your application or your poster. You should insist and insist in saying why you're insisting. You know, I think you might like my poster because it's referring to this particular thing that you alluded to in your discussion, right? I would go there because we're, all a bit narcissistic, and I think it's a nice extension of what you showed 25 years ago. You're like, oh, really? What did I do? And that kind of stuff. So again, don't reverse engineer it. It won't work. It'll be very obvious. But if it's spontaneous and you know about that, don't be intimidated by these situations. You should feel self-confident because you have the right to. You have what it takes to be. So.
So thanks, Denny. Denny, could we get you to put your PowerPoint on the chat, please? Yeah. Now we are coming to the end of our time. I want to ask anybody if they want to ask a question live that hasn't already been answered. We did it this way with me sort of being the voice of all the participants just to make it more efficient and cohesive. I'll take a few live questions to close up, but also English language is an issue, and it's an issue in multiple ways. Most Indian students aren't trained to write, although we have some facility with English. And this shows in the emails that you folks get. So this whole communication about how badly a student wants to work with you could, there is words, and then there is the interpretation of them. Could you answer that, please? Anybody just address how you would how you do a meta-analysis of the emails you get from India in particular?
I think most of us have very multicultural labs, so have tens of countries represented in our workplace and in our own labs, also many countries. So I think we've I feel I'm very adapted to different levels of English proficiency. So I don't think that a poor a few poor word choices or grammatical mistakes would definitely put someone in the reject file for me, as long as the other elements we've discussed were there. I would say it would be something where I would think, okay, gonna need some work. If the email is not in good English, that means that papers will probably be challenging to write. But for me, it's not a deal breaker if the email is not perfect English.
So maybe Patricia could, what would you like to see in a cover letter? What would you like? What elements would you like this person to hit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all highlighted the interest of the person for a topic. I think also the passion of, why that person makes the effort to go in a foreign country and goes through this, and what his view in the future also is one of the aspects, and what he or she wants to learn. I think it's it's a combination of this. If you feel something of sincerity, I think it's very important, and this kind of natural voice which can come out. Mm-hmm. And be sincere and be very frank, not try to have a standard English. I think I prefer a poor English and sincere than something which is really forged.
But you want to see content, right? So lots of adjectives about how deeply somebody loves your work and everything possible. Superlative adjectives won't help unless there is content about what it is you find superlative, right? Exactly. Which means hard work, understanding the person's research and so on. So I think maybe this might be the subject of an ALBA workshop. I'm going to ask any people if they want to ask questions live. We will take maybe 2 or 3 questions. And then to close, I would like opinions from the participants on whether what they would most like as the next ALBA sort of offering from the things that we've discussed. Okay, so if there are any hands, I'll quickly look through the screens, and maybe Matilda and Kirtana can help me if there are anybody who wants to ask their question live. I just feel I shouldn't have been speaking for you, but no hands. Okay, Erin has to leave in 1 minute. So we will actually wrap up in 2 or 3. But if you have to wink out, Erin, then let me offer you my great thanks and appreciation from everybody else. And I will thank the other 2 speakers after you've left. But I don't see any hands. Did anybody see hands? No. There's a Google form for the participants to give their feedback. So in that feedback, please do tell us what you would like the next ALBA offering to be about. The message I'm getting is this broad thing of how does one approach somebody for a postdoc, literally the content. So no, we're not going to write cover letters for you, but what are things that people look for, and what are not a problem, such as English language or so on. So that's one idea, but in the Google form, maybe if you can give us some insights as to what the community would like, then that's something that I will help bring to the table. Yeah, Kirtana and Matilda, is there anything I've missed besides thanking the speakers?
No, I think it's good.
Okay, well, wonderful. I don't know how the hour flew by. I was enjoying myself actually, and then thank you very, very much, Denny and Erin and Patricia, and hopefully you will get flooded with emails with content and passion and so on, and hopefully we may see you in one of our cities in India in your summers, our monsoons someday. All
Thank
right.
you. Bye-bye, everyone. Good luck.